time to hit the road. Recomputing. Never mind, I'll find a new route.
Alright,
Caution, please mind the
everyone.
speed
This is
limit.
John Tapp with the Western Star
Keep left,
57X.
and then turn left.
And as part of the Florida
Turn
State
left.
University, we're going to start with strawberries for Waco. So I invite you to go for a ride. It's going to be all afternoon. Let me put it on NPR first, and then we'll get strawberries, and then we'll get going. So let's go.
Home alive. He noted that 42 soldiers and civilians abducted to Gaza died during their time in captivity. Itai Stern, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Today is Remembrance Sunday, Britain's annual tribute to those who died in war. King Charles led today's service, which included 2 minutes of silence and a wreath laying at a stone monument in London. I'm Nora Rahm, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Pew Charitable Trusts, sharing about the state of housing in America on the After the Fact podcast, available at pewtrusts.org/After the Fact, and the Doris Duke
Keep
Foundation.
Right, and then exit right.
Hey, it's Francis. This week, we're bringing you back to an episode from a while ago about autumn comfort cooking with the wonderful Louisa Weiss and superstar Yotam Ottolenghi. Have a listen. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the Splendid Table from APM. What's comfort food to you? You know, it's funny when I think about it because there are so many dishes that are just labeled comfort food that you'd figure they're universal, but like, I don't know, I like mashed potatoes as much as the next guy, but that's not what I reach for when I need some comfort food. For me, it's much more likely to be a bowl of noodles or fried rice or something. Well, the great cookbook author Yotam Ottolenghi's new cookbook is called Comfort, and it's an exploration of what comfort means, not just to him, as the child of German and Italian parents who grew up in Jerusalem and who now lives and cooks in London, but also to the members of his team who count Malaysia, China, Australia, Germany, Scotland, and of course, the Levant among their heritages and influences. So that's what we're talking about this hour. Later in the show, we'll be joined by Louisa Weiss, whose new book, Classic German Cooking, is more comfort food for the potato-loving crowd. But first, we'll start by welcoming Yotam Ottolenghi. Yotam, it is so great to see you.
Hi, Francis.
Hey, congratulations on this book. We were actually talking before you came on, like how much we love it and how much like we always want to cook everything out of your books, but this one really does feel like, oh, that's going to hit the spot. That's going to hit the spot. And
I'm so glad you say that because I don't know, you just never take it for granted, and there's just so much thought that goes into every single book. And you really wanted to have that impact, that people would go, oh, actually, I'd love to cook that, and that will work for me. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, well, and especially since here your reputation is, you know, we look to Ottolenghi recipes for things that will be exciting and things that will really like spark us. And when we see that, you know, the theme is comfort food, I'm like, oh, that would be interesting and see how they approach that. And so I love how the book begins with this multi-page essay, this sort of journey through all these different ways that the term comfort food can be interpreted, right? And how the idea of comfort food can really be so different. I mean, obviously it's to the person, it's to their nostalgia, it's to their experiences, it's certainly to their culture. One thing you do note that is a commonality is carbs, fat, and sugar.
Go straight on.
So, no matter where you are.
Or you can call it chicken, rice, and cake.
Yeah, exactly. But thinking about carbs, fat, and sugar, as I was like paging through the book, one thing really jumped out to me. Many things did, but one thing really, I was like, oh my God, I need to have that right now. And that is the 1,000-hole pancakes. Please tell us what these are and how to make them.
Yeah, so these are Moroccan pancakes. They're, I don't know how much America know crumpets. Do you have crumpets in America?
I think we can find them, but largely in like a sort of a dainty, like very, like faux British.
Yeah, it's a British pancake. So effectively, those are the Moroccan version of crumpets. The trick is that you want. I'll just explain them. They're really small pancakes. I don't know, like 3-4 inch across, and they're full of holes, so you can see through them, a bit like you get like in an English muffin, but an English muffin, the holes are not all the way through, and right. Here they're kind of all the way through. And in North Africa you find a lot of those kind of pancakes or breads that have holes in them, and that has to do with the fermentation process. Obviously in fermentation you've got all these air pockets or air bubbles in mixes, so you don't get rid of them, you actually enhance them and nurture them, and so you let the mix bubble away really, really well. So it's got yeast, and the yeast just helps with the addition of a bit of warm water for the mix to really bubble away, and you use it like so. When you make bread, you would kind of knock all that air out and then you let it reform itself as the air rises. In these kind of Moroccan pancakes, you keep all those bubbles as you pour the mixture, the batter, into the pan. So you have these 1,000 holes supposedly in every pancake, probably a few less, but it's full of little holes. But it just adds to the wonderful texture. And we serve it with salted butter, honey butter, and pecans. So it's a real delicacy. And when I travel in Morocco, and I've done so a few times, often in the hotels or wherever you stay, they put it out there in the morning with a whole range of other breads, and it's just a wonderful thing to have. It's like the best version of pancake you can think of.
It sounds so good. I mean, we eat a lot of pancakes in our home, and for me, I love a very light pancake. When they're very heavy and dense, I don't really want that in the morning, so I love a light pancake, and I just imagine all the holes really just make the texture so.
Yeah, I'm so glad you talked about the texture of pancakes, because you started by saying that in the book we discuss what makes things comforting, or what makes comfort food, and there's so many ways to approach it, and where we come into this conversation after many people that have discussed this. So I think when we talk about comfort, the first thing that I think about is an emotional reaction, food that creates a particular emotional reaction. That is for me comfort. Whether it's a memory, whether it's a kind of it's a transportive moment into a different moment. There's this kind of something that just gives you that sense of comfort or ease, or there's a lot of words that you can describe that kind of really sense of well-being that comfort food gives you. But beyond the emotional reaction, it's broken into so many other things, and this is where it becomes really interesting. So you mentioned sugar, fat, and carbs, but I want to add something else, and that's texture. And that's why I hung on the word that you use, texture, when you talked about your pancakes. I mean, pancakes. So comfort food comes in all sorts of forms. Texture is so important. Some culture foods are all about texture. Like for me, a pancake is all about texture. If it's not the right texture, it's just not good enough. You just don't want to eat it. I think the same
Right.
applies to pasta and noodles. This is why we're so obsessed
Yeah.
with cooking our pasta al dente. If we
Yeah, yeah,
overcook
yeah.
our pasta, it's not comforting anymore. It's just bin worthy. You just don't want to.
Yeah, it
You
just
don't
makes you
want to
sad.
eat it anymore. It's just
It
it
makes
really.
you sad.
The sauce
Keep
is
left.
important, but the texture of the noodles or the pasta is so much more important than what you put on it. Because I think we all agree that a really well cooked noodle or pasta just needs a drizzle of oil and some garlic, or a grating of cheese and some black pepper. That's
Yeah.
It's not so important. It's the texture that is so important.
I think that's super right. There's something. This sounds almost like a stupid thing to say because all eating is obviously physical, but there's something about the physicality of the texture and the physicality of like the sensation in your mouth, like that contributes to the sense of comfort, maybe even more than a flavor.
Totally. Yeah, it's that kind of intersection between textures, flavors, getting up close with what you eat.
Exit
The
left.
one thing that I always think about, again, in the context of comfort, is that, as a culture, we tend to kind of create barriers between us and our food, like, we wrap it, we refrigerate it, we put it away, and then we eat with a knife and fork. And these are always in which we create that distance. But if you eat with your hands, it's kind of, or if you eat from a bowl but holding it close to your mouth and kind of either using chopsticks or just, sipping it straight from the bowl, it's already adds so much more comfort because it's that kind of close distance between you and the food. And when I look at those pancakes that you've talked about, the first thing I can think about is I could only eat this with my hands, really. It would be ridiculous if I took a knife and a fork. Because they're also very good size. You can just lift them with one hand and kind of fold them slightly as you do a slice of pizza and eat it with your hands. And I think, there you go, another definition of comfort. It's things you eat with your hands. That's comfort, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how when you try to break it down into its components, it's just so many things. It's texture, it's eating with your hands, it's particular aromas, isn't it? Think chicken, right? Chicken is the kind of the international comfort food, isn't it? For non-vegetarians. And what is it about the chicken? It's the aroma, isn't it? That comes out of a chicken soup. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Chicken is interesting too because if you think about it culturally speaking, it's one of the animal proteins that, obviously this isn't universal, but it's like, but pretty far and wide, that people could, even when times were tough, were a little bit more accessible, right? Because
That's right.
you have chickens and you'd want to keep them because they would give you eggs, so that was a more sustainable source of food. It wasn't like raising a whole pig or a sheep or all the time and resources it takes.
It's easier, isn't it? It's easier to raise chicken in your backyard. You can't do most other animals are just it's not practical. But yeah, and then I also find it very interesting because the chicken. So it's that ease. So comfort comes with ease, doesn't it? It's the ease and accessibility. So you would never say something that takes you 2 days to make. Maybe the result would be comfort food, but the whole experience might not be very comforting. So it's that there is ease and accessibility in the process. And I think a chicken soup is something that all of us, even if we're not expert cook, think we can master pretty easily because, you all you need is a big pot, a chicken, and some aromatics. I mean, the aromatics are very varied culturally, but, they sometimes it's, when I was growing up, it was parsley, carrots, celery, and then I started adding ginger and coriander, and I find those very great. But to make a chicken soup is technically one of the easiest things in the world, but you get back so much in return, don't you, in terms of what you could get out of a chicken soup.
Yeah, absolutely. Yotam Ottolenghi is the author of Ottolenghi Comfort. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table from APM.
You count on Houston Public Media. That's why you're here right now. Take the next step and become a new member today. Every gift makes a difference. And with a gift of $5 or more per month, you'll receive PBS Passport, a member benefit that lets you stream more of the shows you love anytime. It only takes a few minutes to make a big difference. Become a new member today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
I'm Anita Rao. Embodied is WUNC's weekly radio show and podcast about sex, relationships, and health. Join me to meet people who aren't afraid to question what we think we know about intimacy, who are embracing the unique ways their bodies shape their lived experience, and who have some fascinating stories to share about their relationships. We'll take on the taboo together next time on Embodied.
Sundays at 8 p.m. on News 88.7.
The Splendid Table is supported by Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. And by Legacy Box, dedicated to helping customers turn boxes with family videos and photos into memories that can be shared with generations to come. More at legacybox.com. And by This Old House Radio Hour podcast, answering listeners' DIY and renovation questions and diving into design and building science trends. This Old House Radio Hour podcast is available in your podcast apps. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the show for curious cooks and eaters. We're talking right now with Yotam Ottolenghi, beloved chef, restaurateur, and cookbook author, about his new book, Ottolenghi Comfort. Let's get back to it with him. I want to go to a dish in this book that I think is actually one of your personal favorite comfort foods, and that's the chicken meatballs.
Yeah.
And
Caution.
it's, I believe it's chicken meatballs with potatoes and lemon. And there's sort of an interesting technique or ingredient in the mixture. Tell us about this dish and this recipe.
So this is a recipe, I love this recipe in so many ways, and whenever people say to me, oh, what is your comfort food? And you know, it's like, as people who are asked these questions on tour all the time, you go like, oh, you know, every day it's something different, which is actually true, because comfort is a lot about the mood, isn't it? So it does change according to mood. But the first thing that often comes to my mind are those chicken meatballs, because they take me back to my childhood in Jerusalem growing up. And in the market in Jerusalem, there used to be, in West Jerusalem, in the Jewish part of Jerusalem, there used to be those kind of satellite restaurants, which were really operated by immigrants who worked in the market or lived around the market. And one of those were a group of immigrants that came from Iraq or Kurdistan, and they opened restaurants around Mahne Yehuda market that really focused or specialized in kibbeh or kubeh, which are very different from the kubeh that you would have in Syria or Palestinian or Lebanese, which are often fried. So those are kibbeh that are often made with semolina. They're stuffed with meat, and then they're poached. They're poached normally in the soup, and there'd be variations on the soup. Could be
so they're like dumplings.
Yeah, they were dumplings, exactly. They were poached to kind of into a dumpling. So you'd have the red ones, which would be beetroot based, beet and chard leaves maybe. So it's a bit like a Middle Eastern borscht. And those semolina dumplings would be stuffed with meat normally and then poached. Really delicious, and they'd kind of go bright pink or red from the beets. The other option would be the one that inspired the meatballs that you were asking me about, the chicken meatballs, and those would be, it was kind of lemony, turmeric-y kind of flavors. And then, so you'd have the chicken broth, a lot of lemon juice, celery, and diced potatoes. So I took the filling out of the dumplings because I didn't want to make people have to make the dumplings, but I just used the chicken meatballs. But the flavors of the soup are the same, and it's got cilantro and cumin, but the lemon and the cinnamon are kind of sweet flavors that really prevail through the broth, and the chicken meatballs just kind of poach in that broth.
Yeah, but you have grated potato in the chicken meatball mixture.
Yes.
So, you know, when you put bread or breadcrumbs, usually that's there. sort of as a filler maybe, but usually that like holds onto moisture and keeps the meatball a little bit lighter, and keeps the meatball a little bit not as dense. When you know, that's why people add like soaked bread or whatever in their meatball mixtures. But how does the grated potato work as part of the meatball mixture? What does that add to it?
So the potato is I would give you different answers. The potato does a little bit like what the bread does. It does lighten it a bit once it's cooked, but not in the same way that bread does. So it's like less meat, you know. So it's not as a kind of a uniform chunk of meat. So it lightens it and makes the texture more interesting as you eat. And also these meatballs have potatoes both in the actual, like you say, grated in the meatballs, but also as dice in the broth. So you kind of have potatoes both ways, which is quite nice to kind of come with those different textures. But also there's a historical reason for that, is that you'd have to do, for the same reason people put bread inside in the meatballs, people would put potatoes. You'd kind of, because meat was expensive, you'd always want to kind of break it down with something cheaper, something like a vegetable or bread or a legume, and this is why the potato ends up being there. The potato absorbs flavor really, really well. So when the liquid comes into the center of those meatballs, it really flavors the potato.
Wow, that's cool.
Zucchini is also really good for that. So zucchini and potatoes are really good for chicken and turkey meatballs. Definitely.
Oh, that's interesting. Actually, since you mentioned zucchini, there is a recipe in this book. So you wrote this book, obviously your name is on it, but you, like right in the beginning, you tell us about the team of collaborators who wrote this book, and all of whom have worked with you for a long time in your various test kitchens, and one is Helen Go, one is Tara Wigley, one is Verena Lockmuller, and you said, I think it was Helen, who came up with a silky zucchini that the other two have taken to so much now, that they make so much, like at their parties, at their homes, that people come to their, can you give me your silky zucchini recipe? So all three of them now own this silky zucchini recipe. First, talk about the silky zucchini.
Yeah, so I want to talk about it because it's a wonderful thing. We grappled with it for quite a while. So Helen Helen and I sat down one day in her home kitchen, and she said, I just love this really simple way of cooking zucchini by grating it and then just slow cooking it, steaming it in its own juices, practically with a bit of olive oil, with a lid on, so it really cooks slowly. It's a very, very simple method. It's just involved an occasional stirring, but otherwise it's once you stir it after a while, it really is. It's how would I put the zucchinis go slightly darker, and they get a really, really nice deep flavor just from cooking in their own juices with some olive oil. And it's nice when it's warm, but it's even nicer when it cools down, because it's quite fresh and the flavors concentrate. And Helen said, you know what, I'd love to do it. I'd love to put it on a tranche or a piece of salmon. So this is how she would serve it at home. And we were struggling with this presentation. We thought, it doesn't really quite work. It looks quite kind of old school. And then we turned it into this wonderful salad. So effectively, we cook our salmon kind of just in the oven, but just a little bit, so it just breaks down.
Go straight on.
And then we use the zucchini that's been cooked the way I told you, kind of almost like a dressing. And then we kind of toss it together, so it's like flaky salmon, the slow cooked zucchini, and a really quick onion pickle, so just thinly sliced onion that's been or shallots that have been sitting with a bit of lemon juice and salt, and they bring the acidity that this needs, and it's just so fresh. And it kind of brings me to this kind of question that we ask ourselves often: is savory food that's served like cold or at room temperature, is that comforting? That's like, because again, like when we're asking ourselves about comfort food, you always imagine warm food, like a stew or soup or mash. And we all agree that this is like the ultimate comfort summer food, because it's kind of it's got sweetness from the slow cooking of the courgette, and it's got that wonderful textural element that again comes from the. So I said courgette. I know I need to say zucchini for the American audience.
We forgive you. I was waiting for when aubergine would make an appearance.
And
I caught you saying cilantro earlier, so thank you for that instead of coriander leaves.
Yeah, I'm getting much better. You know, I make the adjustments almost automatically, but it never is quite. So this salad is just for me the ultimate summer comfort food, because you can take it on a picnic or you can serve it, you know, at home, and it's just an assembly of delicious things, and it really doesn't need a sauce because those slow cooked zucchinis go really wonderfully silky. We even call them silky zucchinis because it's got a wonderful soft textural quality.
Yeah. Well, now I'm sad that we're having this conversation in late October because
I know.
Zucchinis are gone from my market. You know, that just sounds so good.
The thing is with the zucchinis, I mean, when they're around with such abundance.
Oh my God, you're just desperately trying to find ways to use them.
You don't know what to do, and this is one of those things that takes up a lot of zucchinis, and because they cook down, and most of the moisture is kind of we actually salt them a little bit and take out the moisture before we start cooking them, which helps the texture. So you could end up cooking quite a lot of zucchini that way. And when we are back in summer, I would like to recommend to people that to do that, and it sits in the fridge really for quite a long time. It's like up to a week, and it's a really nice thing to put on a bruschetta or just to have on its own with a bit of olive oil, and if you toss in some leaves, you get a wonderful salad.
That's terrific. So let me ask you this. You know, as we were talking about, that was Helen's recipe, and Tara and Verena like really took to it. You know, you are so known, you know, for your food for Mediterranean, Levantine flavors, and your team that you work with, Helen, Tara, and Verena, and more people presumably, come from many parts of the world or have experience in many cuisines from around the world. How have you changed in your style and your outlook through all the time you've spent with them?
It's a really good question, because in some ways I feel that the springboard, the place I started from, which is Jerusalem, which is kind of the heart of the Middle East, and that kind of cross road between Palestinian cooking and the various different other influences, the Jewish diaspora, people who immigrated over the 19th and 20th century, Ottoman influences, etc. It kind of has a very particular set of ingredients and flavors that really jump out of this. You know, the legumes, those kind of like condiments that we're familiar with from tahini and olive oil and garlic and it's pomegranates. There's a set of ingredients and processes that are very familiar to me and I grew up with and I feel very close to. But over the years, I guess I've lived now longer outside the Middle East, or longer in London than I have in Jerusalem, that's for sure. And I've absorbed so many other culinary influences. And when we come to write a book, or when I come to put together a collection of recipes, I often think, okay, well, in some ways, yes, I do have this love and affinity to Middle Eastern ingredients, but I've cooked with so many others that I kind of benefit now from the ability of actually kind of go in between, and I find it fascinating and really uplifting to be able to be using ingredients from different places. And I am surrounded by people from very, very different backgrounds, from Europe, from Asia, from South America. Different cooks in our restaurants really have very different backgrounds. And the one thing that I think I haven't lost is that zest. There's something about the food of the Middle East that is really, there is a certain intensity and contrastful aspect of it, and that's still always there. That sunny food, there's that obsessive relationship that I have with lemons, with garlic, all those aspects. So it's always there. But then the condiments and the flavors and the different other aspects are also coming into the picture. So it's a kind of a balancing act, I suppose, between everything, but it's very joyful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Yotam. Congratulations again on the book, and it's been wonderful talking with you.
Thank you, Francis.
Yotam Ottolenghi's latest book is Ottolenghi Comfort, along with his collaborators Helen Go, Verena Lockmuller, and Tara Wigley. And you can find their recipe for 1,000 whole pancakes at splendidtable.org. Many years ago, I met Louisa Weiss in New York when she was one of the original food bloggers with a blog at the time called The Wednesday Chef. It was lovely, an unassuming peek into a person's life and kitchen with a voice that just made you feel like you were sitting down for a cup of coffee with a friend. Then readers of that blog would eventually read about how Louisa picked up her life in New York and moved to Germany, to Berlin, where she grew up, but more importantly, where she was making a life with her new family. And I admit that I fell out of touch with Louisa after that, but for readers and cooks, we could say we got something arguably better. Louisa's cookbooks on traditional German food, which she fell in love with while there. Her first one, Classic German Baking, came out a few years ago, and her new one is Classic German Cooking. So hey, Louisa, it's so great to see you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, and congratulations on the book. I was flipping through it last night, and it's still pretty warm here, but I'm just totally imagining the minute I'm gonna want to cook everything. But it really got me thinking, because I know you grew up partially in Berlin, between Berlin and the U.S., and you lived much of your young adult life in the U.S. before moving back to Germany. How did you actually learn to cook German food?
So I was born in Berlin, and my nanny, for lack of a better term, was a very good friend of my parents, and she was American. She is American, married to a German man, and I spent a lot of time at their house. And so my earliest food memories are actually of German things that she cooked for me. And then later on, when I went to school here, I moved back to Berlin in 1988 when I was in 6th grade, and I went to school where we had a hot cafeteria lunch, which was like super traditional German food at lunchtime, to of course substitute for the mothers who would have traditionally been cooking food at home for their children. Because in Germany, school ends at 1, or used to end at 1, although in a lot of places it still does, so kids can go home and eat a home-cooked lunch at home. So like traditional German food, I've had a long relationship with it. I loved my school lunches. I loved them.
I'd say I have interviewed many people on this show, and I don't think anyone has ever credited their school cafeteria lunch as being like their inspiration.
I know. Well, German canteens are legendary, right? Because so basically what happened was that I think at the beginning of the century, when industrializations in Germany, became the way that the German populace was developing, people had to be fed. And because eating a hot meal at lunch was so, ingrained in people's traditions, canteens had to provide traditional home-cooked meals. And so to this day, office workers, university students, kids in school, like, you get your hot lunch at the canteen. My husband works for Volkswagen, and he eats a hot lunch at work every time he goes to the office at the canteen.
I love that. It's not like the sad desk salad.
No.
It's so great. It's interesting, too, to hear about how important it is for Germans, like German workers and students, to eat a hot meal at lunch, because you also write that most Germans actually eat a cold meal for, like, the evening meal.
Yes, so it's called Abendbrot, and it's basically what I think a majority of Germans are eating in the evening, which is just open-faced sandwiches on, that good German bread with delicious butter and cheeses or meats or whatever. Sometimes there'll be a pickle or cucumbers and tomatoes or liverwurst, or boiled egg. But yeah, most German families eat cold at night because they know that the hot meal was served at lunchtime. And so at night, you can just have a really low-key, easy dinner, no cooking required. So yeah, that's Abendbrot, and it's actually genius. I mean, especially for young families, like instead of haggling over this meal that you cooked and spent time on, you can just serve Abendbrot, and then everybody can say, oh, I want that on my bread, and I want that, I want that. It's really easy.
Oh my God, you guys invented the snacking board lifestyle.
Yeah.
2 millennia before TikTok.
Yeah, exactly.
Louisa Weiss is the author of classic German cooking. More with her in a minute. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is The Splendid Table from APM.
Democrats picked up some big wins at the state and local level in elections this week. It's important not to read too much into off-year elections, but there are certainly lessons to learn as we head into next year's midterms, and we're going to talk about what those lessons are. I'm David Green. Hope you will join me, Rebecca Piercy, and Mike Dupke for the next Left, Right, and Center.
Left, Right, and Center, Sundays at 5 p.m. on News 88.7.
Hi, I'm John Donvan, host of Open to Debate, where we bring you open-minded discussions and debates about the issues affecting our lives. Everything from science and tech to politics, culture, and foreign policy. In our divided nation, we feel it's more important than ever for people to be open-minded, open to disagreement, and open to listening to the other side. Join me in being open to debate.
Sunday night at 10 p.m. on News 88.7.
Our show is supported by Legacy Box, working to preserve family memories by converting tapes and photos to digital, offering cloud delivery to enable access from anywhere. More at legacybox.com. And by the Slowdown Podcast. Poetry has the power to connect our inner universe and the outer world. In just one turn of phrase, poetry can anchor us or shift a moment, a day, or even a whole life. Listen to the Slowdown Podcast for a hand-picked poem and a moment of reflection every weekday. Subscribe to the Slowdown wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is the show for curious cooks and eaters. We're talking with Louisa Weiss about her new book, Classic German Cooking. Let's get back with her. I think there is, unfortunately, a sort of German food, at least the reputation of German food, at least popularly here in the U.S. Like, there are tons of German Americans, or there are tons of people who are like, their heritage goes back to Germany. So it's nostalgic for a lot of people, but there isn't this sense of like, oh my God, German food, amazing, you'll blow your mind. But you write this book that's very much about classic German food. A lot of German cookbooks are like, no, but today we do this, and we add all these different new influences, and you want to write about classic German food. So tell us about that. Like, what are some of the notions of German food that you really wanted to convey, or maybe some of the ones you want to sort of help us get around? And what surprised you about the German cuisine as you continue to learn about it?
Well, okay, so I feel like I have so much to respond.
Sorry, that was a multi-part question. I didn't mean to lay it all on you once.
Yeah. Well, so I write about it in the book, right? German food has a reputation that really goes beyond national borders. Everybody thinks about German food as being sausages and potatoes and cabbage. And the thing about cliches is that there's always a kernel of truth, right? Potatoes, I have never eaten as many potatoes as I have over the past 2 years of developing the recipes for this book. And so, yes, cliches are rooted in fact. But the truth is that German food is so much more than just sausages and potato salad. Like, it's a huge spectrum of different types of cooking, because Germany is quite large and has influences from the north and the east and the south and the west, and from the spice routes and from southern France and from Italy and Austria and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Eastern European side of things as well. And so classic German food really is much broader than a lot of people think. And the truth is that it's also, I feel like it's the comfort food. When you think about beef stew or, long cooked braises, potatoes, I mean, this is the kind of food that when you're cooking for a family in the winter or for holidays, nothing checks these boxes like German food does. And I would say that today, Germans have a inferiority complex about their food, about their cuisine, and if you poll regular Germans about their favorite food, they'll say spaghetti or döner kebab, which is Turkish sandwiches, or, they'll come up with all kinds of other dishes. But if you poke at them and you say, no, but I mean, what about German food? Like what your grandmother made? They'd be like, oh yeah, well, I really loved her potato dumplings or the way she made her, Schweinebraten or whatever. But that's not, people, I can't admit that. And so what I really wanted with the book was to sort of also give German food the respect that it deserves, I really wanted to show that there is more to German food, to classic German food than just sausages, and to sort of give people a sense that they can be proud of their German and Austrian recipes, that they're really delicious and really beloved for a reason. And yeah. And in terms of what's surprising, I was surprised quite by the breadth, the flavors that traverse the entire country, that they are quite different from one another. And then I would say the other thing that's been surprising, actually mostly just talking about German food, is how many people really do have an emotional attachment to it. It's a real deep emotional attachment to these recipes that just awaken some inner child. A lot of people get kind of misty-eyed when they think about their grandma's potato dumplings or whatever. Yeah, that was very heartwarming.
Oh, I love that. Well, actually, as you're speaking of children, I was talking to a friend the other day, and who was saying hey, my kid finally told me they like mac and cheese. I was like, oh, that's great. And yeah, the stuff that comes out of the box. But so that is such a child's food here, right? The packaged mac and cheese. But there is a recipe in your book for what I think you would describe as maybe the proto mac and cheese or the original mac and cheese, and it's Käsespätzle. I hope I pronounced that anywhere.
It's Käsespätzle, yeah.
Okay, Käsespätzle.
Yeah.
Tell us about this, and I really want to hear you talk about the technique for making the spätzle, because I've made spätzle before, and the dough is a very loose dough or a very tight batter, sometimes, sort of somewhere in that continuum. And when I made it, I was taught to push it through a colander, or there's a special tool for it, or you can just kind of push it through a colander into boiling water and then scoop it out and then saute it in butter. But you have a very different and very cool technique for making it.
Right, so Käsespätzle are, I would say, one of the most beloved dishes of Germany at this point. They're a southern German specialty, and basically you make them by making, I would call it a batter more than a dough, because it's quite loose. You mix together flour and eggs and sparkling water and some salt, and you beat it. You have to beat it with a wooden spoon, and it is exhausting. It's not easy. And then the traditional way to make them, to make the noodles that you then later turn into Käsespätzle, is you smear some of this batter on a cutting board, a flat cutting board, and then you sort of hold it at an angle over a pot of boiling salted water, and with a very sharp knife or with a sharp bench scraper, you kind of shave bits of this smeared batter into the boiling water. This is the most traditional and the oldest way of making spätzle. I think I write in the book that they have records of this being the way to make spätzle since the 12th or 13th century.
Oh God, wow.
Yeah. And so nowadays you can use what a lot of people use is a Spätzlepresse. It kind of looks like a potato ricer. And I've tried making it with, I have a potato ricer, and I've tried making Spätzle with it. They turn into more little nubs. And I realized that the Austrians actually call them Knöpfle, or Southern Germans also call them Knöpfle. So you can use a potato ricer if that's easier. You can pour them through a colander. That's fine. It doesn't really matter how you make them, but the goal is make them, because they're absolutely wonderful. And in Käsespätzle, in the dish, you layer the noodles once they're cooked with heaps of caramelized onions and fragrant Alpine cheese, and it turns into this cheesy, chewy, oniony, savory, glorious mess, and it's just absolutely amazing, like mac and cheese died and went to heaven. So I think of it as the proto mac and cheese. I think that mac and cheese actually derived from Käsespätzle. I don't know if it's true, but that's my story.
That sounds so good. And actually, I was like, oh man, I would love to. Because I love. There are a few. I don't really need to go down this rabbit hole, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. There are a few different sort of like noodle or dumpling making traditions that are, you know, you don't drop it in the boiling water. You sort of like, you have this like action, and it's partly meditated, I'm sure, but it's like very in the moment because like the water is boiling and it's steamy and it's hot, and you want to sort of like develop an efficient motion to like get it in. There are some elements of cooking that to me are sort of the opportunity to feel like you're participating in a craft in a very sort of active way, and that's one of the ones that like really makes me like think like, wow, I'm really cooking right now. I don't know, maybe that's a weird thing to say.
No, you know, I think you're absolutely onto something, because the thing is that making Spätzle isn't easy, right? It's kind of a hassle.
Yeah.
But the result is so delicious, and I think that the sort of hardship that you have to go through to get to the final dish is so worth it, especially when you think about it in like a larger context of like, oh my, you know, I learned this from my grandma, and my grandma learned it from her grandma, and it just turns into this sort of, you're participating in a kind of cultural experience that's much bigger than just a plate of noodles and cheese. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for saying that much more sort of eloquently than I did. I want to move to another dish that I believe is also from southern Germany. It's the Maultaschen.
Maultaschen. Mm-hmm.
Maultaschen. This sounds like an amazing dish, because to me, as I was like looking at it and reading the instructions, it's in my mind, it's like a combination of Italian meatballs and strudel and like wonton soup.
Yes.
So
oh my goodness.
Tell us about this thing.
Yes. Okay. So Maultaschen are a Swabian dish. I would say that if Swabia was a country, Maultaschen would be the national dish. That's one of the meals that they are most proud of, rightfully so. And
ready to roll.
I actually have a hard time describing them because they're kind of a dumpling, but kind of a filled pasta. So basically what you do is you make a very, very thin noodle dough, and you roll it out, and then you make a super fragrant mixture of ground meat, sausage meat, and spinach, and flavorings like nutmeg and marjoram. And you smear this mixture evenly all over the rolled out pasta dough, noodle dough, and then you roll it up and you cut it into little pillow-shaped dumplings or rolled noodles or whatever. And you drop these in boiling water and they cook. And then you can either eat them in broth, which is, I would say, probably the more traditional way. You eat them in a really delicious beef broth with some pungent, vinegary potato salad that's kind of lukewarm alongside of it. Delicious. And red beet salad. Or you can cook them in boiling water, drain them, and then pan fry them and serve them with caramelized onions. Either way, they're fantastic, and they're such a crowd pleaser. Like, children love them, grown-ups love them. You can make them in advance and freeze them. Like, you can batch make them. They're amazing. I love them.
I want it so bad.
Yeah.
I want that so bad, but I don't know where to get it.
You can make it. You can
God.
make it. Maultaschen are one of the most satisfying things to make because actually they're really not that hard, but the results are stunning. Like, very much worth it. You can do it.
Yeah. Terrific. Okay, forget what we said earlier. All this food sounds crazy delicious. This is not something anyone needs to apologize for. I want to get to a couple more before you get out of here. The Käsesuppe. Käsesuppe?
Käsesuppe. Mm-hmm.
Cheese soup.
So Käsesuppe is an Austrian, I would say it's more of an Austrian dish, always Alpine. And Austrian food differs from German food in a number of different ways. I would say one of the ways is that typically it's more refined, it's more sophisticated, it has more chefy cooking steps. And Käsesuppe is really like a perfectly French base, basically. You make a bechamel, and instead of loosening it just with broth, you loosen it with cream and broth and melted cheese. And the alchemy of all of these ingredients creates this creamy, savory, intensely delicious soup that almost tastes like mushrooms, but there's not a mushroom to be found. It's just like really umami and amazing.
Turn left.
It's intense, so I recommend serving it in tiny little cups as like an amuse-bouche before dinner, because you could eat an entire bowl of it. You might have a stomachache afterwards. But what the recipe has you do is make little croutons with digestive spices, so fennel and anise, and
that sounded so cool.
The combination of this sort of herbal fennel and the toasty bread and the cheesy umami-rich soup. It's fantastic.
Turn right.
Yeah. And I love that sort of alpine cheese, that kind of like high mountain, very...
Make a U-turn.
Sometimes it has a mushroomy flavor because of the way it's aged. But there's also a very fresh cheese that's super, super important in German food. Quark.
Yep.
Why is quark so important, and what are some ways to use it?
Quark, I mean, this was something I discovered through writing the book. Basically, Tacitus, a Roman scribe, wrote about the Romans in, what was then Germania or whatever. He wrote down what the German tribes were eating 2,000 years ago. And they were eating something called lac concretum, which I'm pretty sure is just quark. It's like, hung cheese. And
like lac is in like milk.
Milk, yeah,
and
concrete milk,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, like hardened, solidified milk. Okay.
Solidified milk. And I think the other flavors that he said that they drank a lot of beer, they ate this cheese, and they ate a lot of game and berries. And I was like, wow, 2,000 years later, not a lot has changed.
Yeah.
And so quark is this fresh cheese that's made from, the recipe that I give, you take fresh buttermilk and you bake it at a very, very low temperature in the oven, and then the whey separates from the solids, and you hang this in a cheesecloth overnight, and what remains in the cheesecloth is quark. And it's this fresh cheese. It's very, very light. It has hardly any fat in it. It has kind of a sour flavor, and it's incredibly versatile. You can use it as a spread on your bread in the morning. You can eat it instead of yogurt. You can bake with it. You can turn it into the best cheesecake ever, a recipe for which is in my baking book, Classic German Baking. You can turn it into little quark fritters that are rolled in sugar and sold at Christmas markets, or served as an afternoon snack. It's just like
I can just
one
imagine
of
that like tangy buttermilk flavor, but fried and then covered in sugar.
I mean,
oh God, sign me up.
Yeah, it's an amazing ingredient, and it's such a huge part of the German diet that Germans don't even really understand how unusual it is that other countries don't eat quark. So yeah. Outside of Germany, hardly anybody knows about it. I mean, even Germany's neighbors, direct neighbors. I mean, Austria, obviously, they call Quarktopfen, but the other countries, they're like, quark? So I have a lot of recipes for quark in the book. I think one of the most beloved, like my husband's favorite, he has a lot of favorite recipes, but one of his favorite things to eat is a really traditional dish from northern Eastern Germany, which is just boiled potatoes, peeled, served with quark that's been flavored with parsley and chopped onions and scallions, and a little drizzle of linseed oil. And this is considered like the healthiest, most nutritious meal that you could eat. And it's very, very cheap. And to this day, if you go to the canteen, for example, the city hall near my apartment, which is where JFK gave his famous speech in 1962 or whatever that was, they have this dish, potatoes with quark and oil, on the menu every single day of the week because it only costs like €4.
And look at that. Classic German food. Potatoes and cheese.
Yeah. I mean, I try to, there are other things in the book besides potatoes and cheese.
I know, I'm sorry, I kept going to all the cheese dishes.
Caution, please mind speed.
All right, well, Louisa, it has been such a blast talking with you. It's been so great to see you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to talk to you, too.
Louisa Weiss is the author of classic German cooking. You can find her recipe for Käsespätzle, Swabian noodles with mountain cheese and caramelized onions at splendiddable.org. And that is our show for this week. Thank you for spending the time with us. We hope you have something comforting today. We'll talk to you next week. Our show is produced by APM, American Public Media, and supported by BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public. Splendid Table is created by Sally Swift and Lynn Rosetto Casper, and it's made every week by technical producer Jennifer Lupke, producer Maria Wortel, and managing producer Sally Swift. Jordan Turgeon is our digital producer with help from Delonix Wynn. And Lauren Humpert is our senior podcast production manager. Thanks for listening. I'm Francis Lamb, and this is APM, American Public Media.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from the Houston Ballet, presenting Stanton Welch's The Nutcracker. The holiday tradition returns to the Wortham Theater next Friday. Tickets available at houstonballet.org.
Hi, I'm Brandon Rottinghouse.
And I'm Jeronimo Cortina, host of Party Politics on Houston Public Media.
We're inviting you to News and Brews happening February 17th at St. Arnold Brewing Company. Let's have a thoughtful political conversation over great food and cold drinks.
When you donate $60, select your ticket to News and Brews, and you will also get a complimentary pint glass.
Get your ticket today at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
See you there.
Your NPR station, News 88.7 KUHF Houston, a service of the University of Houston. Get local and breaking news anytime at houstonpublicmedia.org. Listen to us on your favorite devices. Tell your smart speaker to play News 88.7.
I'm Christopher Kimball, and this is Milk Street Radio. Today it's the unlikely rise of tinned fish. Reporter Adjoa Jimabrempong brings us the story of how tinned fish became a cultural sensation.
Sardines and other tinned fish are having a huge resurgence, and experts are referring to this time as the Sardine Girls Summer.
What's going on with the sardines?
Social media has been touting the benefits of this high-protein power food.
What started out as packaging design for canned fish is now a symbol of coastal luxury.
I'm convinced that I'm easily gaslit because why did TikTok convince me that I like sardines?
The cult of tinned fish.
Gorgeous, gorgeous girls eat sardines.
That's coming up next on Milk Street Radio from PRX after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. The longest shutdown in American history continues as Americans face flight delays and a pause in federal food assistance. NPR's Luke Garrett reports.
Democrats and Republicans can't agree on whether or not to extend expiring health care tax credits. This impasse has Democrats refusing to fund the government until the Republican-controlled Congress passes these health care benefit extensions. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries tells NBC he needs it in writing.
I don't think that the House Democratic Caucus is prepared to support a promise, a wing, and a prayer.
On Saturday, Senate Republicans rejected a Democrat offer to reopen the government in exchange for a one-year extension on health care subsidies. GOP Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma tells NBC the tax credits just aren't working.
If we're going to allow subsidies to get out there, get them to people, not to insurance company.
Lankford says the government will reopen by Thanksgiving, while Jeffries wasn't sure. Luke Garrett, NPR News, Washington.
Many SNAP recipients are going without food assistance as a legal battle over how the Trump administration pays for it plays out in court. From member station KQED in San Francisco, Juan Carlos Lara reports.
Lisa Marie Fusco is a UC Berkeley student with disabilities who relies on SNAP. She hasn't gotten her benefits for the month, but says she's been able to rely on the community around her.
I have other students that are sharing what they have, sharing their food with me, sharing, meals and things and supplies. And there's like a really big community effort I'm seeing out here. It's really amazing.
But Fusco says she's scared for those who don't
Turn
have
left.
a community to rely on in this time and feels expendable in the eyes of the government. The California Department of Social Services says benefits may be further delayed as legal cases play out. For NPR News, I'm Juan Carlos Lara in San Francisco.
The parents of a Florida teenager imprisoned for allegedly throwing stones in the Israeli-occupied West Bank say his detention has been extended until mid-December. Mohammed Ibrahim, a U.S. citizen, was 15 when he was arrested and has been held without trial for nearly 9 months. NPR's Lauren Freyer reports.
This was Mohammed Ibrahim's 10th hearing in an Israeli military court. His father, Zahar Ibrahim, says it adjourned without a plea bargain or trial date. The Ibrahims are Palestinian American. They split their time between the Tampa area and the occupied West Bank, where Israeli soldiers took Mohammed from his bed last February. In Israeli prison, he's not allowed family visits nor phone calls. Court documents show he faces up to 20 years for stone throwing under security rules imposed after the Hamas attacks of October 7th, 2023. Members of Congress have called for his release in a letter that says he may have, quote, signs of torture. The State Department says the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, is deeply involved in this case. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
This is NPR News in Washington. A super typhoon slammed into the Philippines today with torrential rain and sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. Officials say 2 people died. This was the second typhoon to hit the country in less than a week. The earlier storm last Tuesday killed more than 200 people. Staff at Lincoln Cathedral in Britain discovered a 150-year-old dinner invitation from the author of Alice in Wonderland. Vicki Barker reports.
Lewis Carroll sent the invitation to a cathedral cleric in 1875, 10 years after the publication of Alice in Wonderland. Written in purple ink and including a seating plan, the guests include Carroll's former Oxford tutor Bartholomew Price, whose nickname was Bat. Curator Fern Dawson telling the BBC.
The Mad Hatter's Tea Party really is recreated here. We have reference to the bat from Twinkle Twinkle Little Bat in Alice in Wonderland. We have Professor Price, who is Bat.
The 150-year-old menu was also listed: soup, black curry, lamb cutlets, apple souffle, and apricot cream. For NPR News, I'm Vicki Barker in London.
The NFL says former Commissioner Paul Tagliabue died today. He served as NFL Commissioner from 1989 until his retirement in 2006. During his time, the NFL expanded from 28 to 32 teams from 6 divisions to 8. When he was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, he said, "For decades, the NFL has served to unite people from all over America." Paul Tagliabue was 84. I'm Nora Rahm, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Drexel University, whose cooperative education program positions students to explore future careers before graduation. This is experiential education. More at drexel.edu.
This is Mill Street Radio from PRX. I'm your host, Christopher Kimball. Today, it's tinned fish.
I eat sardines every single day. Let me tell you why.
Over the last few years, tinned fish has become a viral sensation. We talked to a few of the masterminds behind its popularity.
For me, it feels like a little bit of a personal triumph. Every single time I get a message that says, I tried sardines, I took that leap of faith.
We find out what it means for food to reach cult status.
People who say, I'm a beginner to tinned fish, or I'm looking for something, more advanced. Like, nobody ever says, I'm looking for an advanced can of soup.
Later in the show, reporter Ajua Jima Brempong shares the surprising true story of tinned fish. But first, we're joined by author and chef Joshua McFadden for his new book, 6 Seasons of Pasta. Joshua, welcome back to Milk Street.
Turn left.
Thanks so much for having me again.
Let's start with the basics here. So most people think,
Turn left.
There are a dozen pasta dishes, I should know, like make a lasagna or Alfredo or cacio e pepe. But you don't think that way. You go like, pasta is a base, and I can layer on all the flavors of the seasons on top of it. So do you want to just help people understand how you think about pasta?
Well,
It's one of my great loves in life, so let's start there. I think that pasta itself arguably is one of the favorite foods of the world, and I think that there's a great level of importance to making it with respect. So I'm always starting with an incredible moment of just awe for the idea that what you're going to create is just something that's going to be so special if you do it right. And I think that comes from the little steps that you're following, whether that's blooming the garlic or adding the chilies at the right time, adding the tomato at the right time, herbs at the beginning, herbs at the end, a little bit of olive oil at the end, cheese off the heat.
A lot of olive oil at the end.
A lot of olive oil.
I have found that adding, I won't tell you how much, quite a lot of olive oil at the end, really, like in a basic marinara, it is, because you get all the fruitiness, you haven't cooked out all the volatiles. It really is an amazing trick. Yeah.
Oh, just that smell.
Yeah.
When you're putting it on the off the heat. Oh, that itself.
I think one thing I'd say about your book, many things, but one thing I really like is you honor the sauce by treating it with respect. Like I think you even put pesto into the skillet with some cooking water and warm it up, and you don't just plop it on top of a big pot full of pasta. So you are marrying the sauce and the pasta and thinking a lot about the best way to do that. And there's some delicacy in that marriage, right?
Oh, it's so important.